Hello, my name's Elira, and last week, at our family reunion, my sister stood up in front of everyone and said, "You're not welcome anymore. You're not family." But that wasn't the beginning. That was just the first time they said it out loud. They'd already cut me out of photos, replaced my name on legal papers, passed around group chats calling me the ATM girl. They didn't just forget me, they rewrote me. And now I'm asking myself, was I ever really part of this family? Or just a role they needed filled? I arrived a little early, maybe 15 minutes before the official start. The yard smelled like cut grass and citronella candles. A row of white folding chairs curved around long tables draped in linen. Name cards fluttered in the breeze, pinned under clear plates and silverware polished just enough for a picture. I scanned the lineup of names. Marvin's card was front and center, of course. Aunt Judy had hers right beside Marvine's, and even the cousin who hadn't shown up in 4 years had a spot. But there was no Elira. Not at the head table, not even by the cooler, not anywhere. I stood there for a few seconds, pretending to reread each name. My hands were dry, but I kept wiping them against the sides of my dress like I'd touched something sticky. Maybe they forgot. Or maybe it wasn't a mistake at all. "Must have been a printing error," Marvine said as she passed behind me. Her voice was dipped in sweet tea, but had that sharp edge only she knew how to deliver with a smile. "You'll manage, right?" I nodded once, then walked past everyone and sat down at the furthest end of the yard, where an extra chair leaned unevenly near the trash bin and a stack of spare napkins. Nobody said anything, not a single, "Hey, glad you made it." Just half smiles and raised chins from across the lawn. The food was good. Marvine always went all out for optics. Glazed ham, sweet potatoes with toasted marshmallows, deviled eggs with paprika lined like trophies. I ate just enough to keep my hands busy. The conversations buzzed around me. Wedding plans, new jobs, a baby on the way. No one asked about my life, and I stopped expecting them 2 years ago. After the plates were cleared, I saw it coming, the shift in energy. Marvane clinked her glass with a butter knife, the sound crisp and practiced. Conversations died down. Everyone turned their chairs toward the makeshift platform she stood on, microphone in hand. I didn't expect a toast, but I didn't expect what came next either. "We've talked," she said, holding her wine like she was about to bless the room. "And we've agreed. Elira is no longer part of this family." It landed like a slap, but no one flinched. A few chuckled nervously. Uncle Trey adjusted his collar. My mother looked at the tablecloth. And someone, I don't even know who, actually clapped. I stayed seated, my hands in my lap, my wine glass untouched. I waited for someone to interrupt her. To say it was a joke, but it wasn't. And the worst part? It felt rehearsed. Scripted. Like this was the scene they'd been preparing for, and I'd walked right into it. Marvine continued, still smiling. "This family is about unity, about mutual respect. And some people, some choices, just don't fit that anymore. It's time we stop pretending otherwise." No one looked at me. Not really, not even Mom. Especially not Mom. I thought about saying something, anything, but the words turned to stone in my throat. Instead, I listened to the clink of forks being placed gently on plates, to the wine being poured like nothing had happened. After a while, the applause died down. Conversation resumed, shallow and strained. Someone asked about the price of mulch, another about school schedules. And just like that, my exile was absorbed into the hum of family normalcy. I pushed my chair back slowly, letting the legs scrape the wooden deck. No one turned around. Walking away from the table, I passed the photographer lining up the cousins for a group shot. He asked, "You want in?" out of habit. I shook my head. "No," I said. "I'm just passing through." The camera clicked anyway, capturing a memory I wouldn't be in. As I rounded the corner of the house, I felt the sweat pooling under my collar. Not from heat, but from stillness, like I'd been holding my breath for a decade and just realized it. I kept walking. through the side yard, past the carport, until the laughter faded behind me. I reached the gate that led out to the driveway and paused. Last year, I made a scrapbook, hand-cut pages, captions written in silver ink, laminated photos from every branch of our family tree. I mailed it 2 weeks early. At the time, I told myself it was a gesture of goodwill. Looking back, I realize it was more like a peace offering wrapped in silence. No one ever brought it up. No one displayed it. It just disappeared. Like me. I stood by the gate longer than I should have. The porch lights flickered on behind me. I heard someone shout for more ice. And someone else laughed, loud, throaty. Maybe it was Aunt Judy. Maybe it wasn't. Did it matter? Not anymore. I turned away from the gate slowly, not because I was unsure of leaving, but because I wasn't sure I'd ever come back. The sun was dipping lower, throwing long shadows across the backyard. I walked back toward the event, blending into the edges where no one would notice me. Not that anyone had before. I wasn't ready to go yet. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of watching me walk out like I didn't belong. If I was going to leave, it would be on my terms. For now, I sat in the back row, out of frame, but still in the room. They'd set up a projector under the old sycamore tree. Someone dimmed the lights, and a digital slideshow flickered onto the hanging white sheet. The title screen said, "Family Through the Years." Soft music hummed from the Bluetooth speakers. Piano, sentimental, predictable. The first few photos were black and white. My parents on their wedding day, Uncle Rick in Vietnam, baby pictures of Marvine dressed in frilly bonnets. Then came the 90s. Theme parks, beach trips, Thanksgiving dinners, faces I remembered, moments I hadn't thought of in years. But none of them included me. Not one. Even in group shots where I remembered standing, I'd been edited out, or the photo was cropped so tightly I didn't exist in the frame. At first, I thought maybe I'd missed something. Maybe I'd look up and see my 12th birthday, or the Christmas where I saved the dinner after the oven went out. But nothing came. It was as if I'd never been born. I leaned toward Branwen, who sat 2 seats away, fiddling with the condensation on her glass. "Did you help pick these?" I asked quietly. She looked over, startled. No. Marvine and your mom handled everything. They said it was easier that way." Easier to erase me, apparently. I didn't cry. I just sat back in the metal chair, the legs sinking into the grass, and watched people laugh and comment on the slides like they were watching a documentary about a world I never lived in. "You remember that trip to Gatlinburg?" someone said. "Illyra was with us, right?" Marvine didn't even turn her head. "No, she stayed home that year. Too busy with college, I think." That was a lie. I'd been the one who booked the cabin, who drove everyone up when Dad's car broke down. I still remembered carrying Marvine's suitcase because she said her back hurt. But sure, rewrite the script. The screen moved on to wedding photos, including ones from Marvin's big day. Her husband, Deshaun, had his arm around her, grinning like he'd won the lottery. My stomach knotted, but I kept my expression neutral. I hadn't seen Deshaun since the day he vanished from my life. No goodbye, no closure. We had dated for 4 years. We talked about marriage, kids, getting a dog. Then one morning, he ghosted me. 2 months later, I heard from a mutual friend that he and Marvine were a thing. A year later, they were married. Mom said nothing. No one did. Now, here he was, crossing the lawn toward me with a glass of iced tea in hand, wearing a beige linen shirt like he was straight out of a vacation brochure. "I didn't think you'd show," he said casually. I looked up. "Neither did I." He chuckled, awkward. "You look good." I nodded. "I know." He stood there a moment too long, like he thought this was going to be a moment. I didn't give him one. "How's married life?" I asked, voice even. "It's, busy. We've got the little one now. Keeps us on our toes." I raised an eyebrow. "Glad to hear you're finally capable of commitment." He blinked, then smiled too wide. "Always had that fire, huh?" "No," I said. finishing my drink. I just finally stopped confusing silence with kindness. Before he could respond, I walked past him toward the drink table, where Branwen was pretending to pour more lemonade into a half-full cup. "That was something," she muttered. I glanced sideways. "You knew?" Her eyes dropped. "I didn't know it started with you, but once I saw them together, I didn't ask questions." "Must have been easier that way," I said, my voice clipped. A few minutes later, while the slideshow still flickered behind us, Branwen leaned in again. "You know that scrapbook you sent last year?" I turned to her slowly. "Mom tossed it," she said, voice low. "Said it was too self-centered. Too many photos of you." I didn't respond. What was there to say? I'd spent hours putting that together, cropping, gluing, captioning. I'd even included people I hadn't spoken to in years. Not because I craved attention, but because I thought maybe if they saw the memories laid out in front of them, they'd remember how much I'd loved them. Turns out, love isn't always enough to make someone look your way. I stood there for a long while, surrounded by a crowd that had decided I was disposable. I wasn't angry, not in that moment. I was something colder than that, something quieter. I wasn't sad they forgot me. I was done reminding them I existed. I stayed until the last frame of the slideshow faded into black, not because I wanted to, but because walking out would have made it look like I couldn't handle it, like I was being too sensitive, which, in this family, was the same as being unstable. Back at my car, the air had cooled just enough to roll the windows down. I sat in the driver's seat, keys untouched in the ignition, staring at the silence in front of me. A part of me wanted to drive straight back to the motel, take a hot shower, and let the sting of the evening dissolve. But I hesitated. Something in my chest felt unfinished. Then my phone buzzed. At first I thought it was a generic alert. But when I glanced down, I saw it. A message from a group chat I didn't recognize. Legacy Core? I frowned. The only group threads I was part of were work-related or painfully dry family announcements. This one wasn't either. I tapped into the thread and scrolled. The first message was from Marvine. Did Elira actually show up wearing blue? Like, read the room? Then another from Deshawn. She thinks she's classy but walks around like she owns the place. Clydia chimed in. She always wanted to be the martyr. Just give her a check and she'll go away. And then the kicker. ATM girl strikes again. I kept scrolling. My stomach turned. There were screenshots of emails I'd sent when Dad was in hospice, texts I thought had been private, twisted out of context. One message, from a cousin I'd trusted since childhood, read, "She's not generous. She's guilty. That's the only reason she ever helps." It wasn't just mockery. It was a collection, a dossier, like they had been saving every piece of me to pick apart behind a digital curtain. I don't know who added me by mistake, or if it was intentional, a passive-aggressive jab dressed as an oops. But I screenshotted every word. Quietly, carefully, like someone documenting a crime scene no one else believed was real. I didn't text back. I didn't even leave the group. I just sat there, letting the glow of the screen dim against the dusk, letting the mask peel off without resistance. I drove to the motel in near silence. The usual classic rock station felt too loud, too out of place. When I got to the room, I threw my bag onto the bed, slipped off my shoes, and turned on the lamp beside the window. The light hit a box on the dresser, one I hadn't touched in years. It was an old keepsake box my Aunt Gail had given me when I graduated college. I'd left it at her place years ago after moving states, and she must have dropped it off here when she heard I'd be staying. I hadn't expected anything inside to matter anymore. But when I opened it, there it was. A gold necklace, thin chain, slightly tarnished from time. The charm used to read my name, Elira, etched in delicate script. Now the metal was scratched, almost buffed out entirely, but the curve of the E was still faintly visible. And I knew that necklace, because Marvine wore it at brunch. She had it tucked into her blouse, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it, but I had seen it. The same charm, same clasp, same chain, only now with no name. I held it in my palm, turning it slowly. My chest didn't ache. It just settled, like a question had finally been answered. That necklace was mine. It had been mine since I was 15. Dad had it custom made when I won the county spelling bee. He said, "It's not about the trophy. It's about remembering who you are when no one's clapping." I guess someone decided I didn't need to remember anymore. After a while, I set the necklace down and pulled an old notebook from the bottom of the box. I hadn't opened it in years. It still had a coffee stain on the back cover and a folded receipt stuck between the pages from a diner in North Carolina, my first solo road trip. Inside, about halfway through, was a journal entry I barely remembered writing. It said, "If they only call you when something breaks, you're not a daughter, you're a service." I read it aloud to the quiet room, my voice flat, steady, not broken, not bitter, just clear. I'd known. Even then. I turned off the lamp and lay on top of the blanket, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. The air conditioner clicked on, low and humming, the only sound in the room. Tomorrow, I'd see them again. Pretend I didn't know what I knew. Not yet. Not all at once. Because letting truth out too fast would let them pretend they didn't hear it. And I wasn't about to give them that. By morning, the room was still cool and quiet, the kind of silence that doesn't invite rest but dares you to act. I sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through old messages, staring at the familiar names that now read like strangers. My phone felt heavier than it should have, like it knew what I was about to do. I opened the group chat, the one labeled Family Thread, not the secret one they thought I didn't know about. This was the polished one, the version for announcements and potluck sign-ups and fake birthday wishes. I typed a single line. No salutation, no context. "I've been holding your secret for 10 years. I'm done protecting people who erase me." Then I hit send. Nothing for 5 minutes. Just that little read receipt under each name. Marvine, Clydia, Deshawn, a few cousins. Every one of them saw it, and not one of them answered. Then from Branwyn, a heart emoji, no words. But it was enough. The kind of enough that confirms what you already knew, that someone else had been watching and just didn't have the nerve to say anything until now. I tossed the phone beside me on the bed and took a breath, the kind that doesn't calm you, just clears space. 26 minutes later, the screen lit up again. Mom. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times, then picked up. "Elira," she said, her voice too sweet, too smooth. "I saw your message." I waited. "Is everything all right, sweetheart? Maybe it's not the time to dig up old wounds. We're trying to have peace, aren't we?" Peace. That word always felt weaponized in her mouth. Translated, it meant, don't cause waves unless you're ready to be blamed for the flood. "I think we've confused peace with silence," I said flatly. She laughed lightly. "You've always been dramatic, you know that? Sensitive? Your father used to say you felt things too much. He also used to say I was the only one who cleaned up after the messes." Silence. Then the classic move, pivot and dismiss. "Let's not become the bitter one in the family, okay? That's not a good look." "Thanks for the advice," I said, and hung up. No goodbye, no love you. Just the click of a line that didn't need to stay open anymore. I got dressed slowly. A plain blouse, clean jeans, sneakers. I wasn't planning to go anywhere dramatic. Just to the diner around the corner to get some air, some pancakes, and maybe remember what it felt like to sit somewhere without being judged for breathing. At the booth, between bites, I opened my phone again. Not to check replies. Still nothing for the record. But to open a folder I hadn't touched in over a year. It was labeled just in case. Inside, scanned emails, receipts for loans that had never been repaid, medical bills with my name at the top, but someone else's story tied to them. Screenshots of messages that started with, "L, I know this is a lot to ask," and ended with silence once I paid. At the bottom, one file stood out. Lena Charleston.pdf. I didn't open it, not yet. But I stared at it like it might blink first. That file, those pages, were the one thing I'd kept to myself. The one truth that, if exposed, would crack their polished little story wide open. It wasn't a bluff. It was the reason they'd always tread just slightly carefully, even as they pushed me further out. Marvine's perfect image, her Instagram-ready marriage, the whispered business trips that didn't match her calendar. That PDF held dates, hotel charges, and names. And I'd held it for a decade. Out of grace, out of restraint, out of some foolish loyalty that they'd long ago stopped earning. I slid the phone face down and looked out the diner window. Cars passed. A couple argued quietly near the parking lot. The waitress filled coffee cups like it was muscle memory. No one cared what I was carrying. No one had to. That was the point. When I paid the check and stepped outside, the sunlight was sharp but welcome. I walked down the block slowly, no destination in mind. I just needed motion. Back at the motel, I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't call anyone. I sat by the window and watched the afternoon pass like a train I didn't need to catch. I'd given them a warning. Not a threat. Not a plea. A line. And if they crossed it, they'd find out that the quiet one doesn't stay quiet forever. The next morning, I dressed slower than usual. Not out of indecision, but intention. I wanted to wear something plain, unremarkable, something no one could pick apart later. Gray sweater, dark jeans, a pair of flats I could walk in for hours, if it came to that. Brunch was being held under the big tent in the backyard, a safe fallback in case it rained. It didn't. The sky was obnoxiously clear. Rows of folding tables stretched out under plastic chandeliers, and someone had lit those fake candles again, trying hard to look like warmth without providing any. I arrived halfway through the coffee refill chatter. My seat had no nameplate, again. I didn't bother to ask. Just as I was settling in, Marvine stood up from the head of the table, beaming like she was about to announce a prize. "Before we move on to dessert," she said, her voice just a bit too loud, "let's hear from our little sister. Elira always has the best stories, don't you think?" People clapped, some out of politeness, some because they genuinely didn't see the dagger wrapped in glitter. A few heads turned in my direction. I caught Clydia's expression, tight smile, eyes already scanning for how to control the damage if I stepped too far out of line. I stood, walked to the mic that had been pulled into the center aisle. I could feel the tension before I touched it. Static filled my ear when I spoke. "I just wanted to share a small memory about Dad," I began, my voice steady. "He once told me, the night before his last surgery, that he wasn't afraid of dying. He was afraid of being forgotten." The mic cut. Just like that. I tapped it once. Nothing. A few people chuckled nervously. A cousin behind me said, "Technical stuff, you know how it is." Marvine tilted her head. "Someone check the battery?" Clydia sipped her orange juice like it had nothing to do with her. I smiled, quiet, controlled, and walked back to my seat. I didn't argue. I didn't ask for another try. Instead, I reached into my tote bag and pulled out a folder. Thick. Tabbed. Labeled. I placed it on the table in front of them, calm as laying down a menu. Marvine blinked. "You've been collecting dirt?" "No," I said. "I documented. There's a difference." She reached for it. I let her. Inside were copies of bank transfers from my accounts to theirs. Text messages asking for help. Screenshots of urgent, "Can you wire this just until next Friday?" Emails with subject lines like "emergency" and "only you can help." Itemized invoices from hospitals, tuition payments, car repairs. Everything they'd asked for. Years of it, all labeled by date and who requested it. One page near the front was titled, "When they said it was an emergency." Marvine flipped through silently at first, then scoffed. "This is petty." "No," I said. "What's petty is pretending I was never part of this family while depending on me like I was your safety net." Deshawn leaned forward, squinting at one of the pages. Wait, this was you? You paid for the van last year? Branwen's voice came from the end of the table. I thought that donation came from the church. I looked around. It didn't. It came from me. But I didn't say anything because I thought keeping peace meant swallowing what hurt. The table went quiet. Clydia still hadn't looked at me directly. She tapped her nails against the edge of her plate like she wanted to make noise, but hadn't picked the right distraction yet. I took a breath. I'm not asking for thanks. I'm not asking for apologies. I'm not even asking to be included. I'm just done pretending that silence is the same thing as grace. I sat back down. No one moved. The tent, the candles, the whole stage they'd built to freeze me out. It all sat still, like someone had hit pause on the performance. Someone at the far end reached for a napkin. It tore. Marvine shifted in her chair. You always find a way to make yourself the center, huh? No, I replied. I just stopped letting you build your narrative around my silence. And with that, I stood, gathered my bag, and walked away. Not storming off, not slamming chairs, just walking. I passed by the buffet table, the silverware stacked neatly, and reached the edge of the tent. As I stepped out into the sunlight, I heard someone behind me whisper, She had receipts. Yes. Yes, I did. I didn't go back to the motel after that brunch. I drove aimlessly for a while, letting the road hum beneath me. I didn't need a destination. I just needed space to hold my breath for a bit longer. When the sun started dipping low, I turned back toward the house, not because I missed it, but because Orville had texted. He said he was nearby and needed to speak with me in person. He didn't elaborate, just said, Your father left something behind. It's time. That was enough to turn the wheel. The dinner portion of the reunion was being set up when I arrived. Long tables under the sycamores, white lights strung like wedding decor, plates already lined up. People smiled and waved when they saw me, too rehearsed to feel real. I nodded back, just enough to keep it moving. Orville was waiting by the far end of the patio, holding a brown envelope, his suit jacket wrinkled from hours in the car. He looked like he hadn't slept much. Maybe he hadn't. He didn't greet me with small talk, no pleasantries, just handed me the envelope like it weighed 100 pounds. Your father gave this to me before his last surgery, he said, his voice low. He told me to hold it, said, only give it to Illyra if it comes to this. I didn't ask what this meant. We both knew. I opened it with slow hands. Inside was a copy of my father's original will. Clean, legal, notarized, dated 6 months before his final hospitalization. In it, he'd named me executor of his estate. Not Marvane, not Clydia. Me. He wrote in clear language that I was to be the one overseeing decisions regarding the family home, the investments, and, specifically, the future preservation of family legacy. His words, not mine. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I simply folded the paper back, slid it into my bag, and thanked Orville with a firm nod. They changed it, didn't they? I asked. They filed a revision. But legally, he paused, that only holds if you were informed. Were you? I shook my head. No. Then you need to do something about it, he said. Because they already are. By the time we returned to the table, the food had just been served. Someone had carved the roast. The bread basket was already half empty. No one stood when we approached, except Marvine, who looked up and froze when she saw what was in my hand. Clydia's gaze followed, steady but cautious, like she knew the game had shifted. Orville pulled out the extra chair beside me and sat. No announcement, no invitation, just presence, which sometimes says more than words. I stood up, not rushed, not dramatic, just firm. I need to say something, I said. Some glanced up. Others kept chewing. But slowly, one by one, heads turned. My father gave me something, I said, holding up the folder. A copy of the original will, the one you all never showed me. Marvine laughed once, sharp, strained, That's old. It was changed later. We agreed. Orville cut in, cool and precise. Revisions are only valid if all legal beneficiaries were informed. Were they? He looked directly at Clydia. She didn't blink. We did what made sense. Elira has always been self-sufficient. She didn't need. That's not how the law works, Orville said. A hush followed. Someone's fork hit the plate with a clink. Branwen asked, almost under her breath. So, the house, it's hers? I didn't look at Marvane. I looked at the space between us. I didn't ask for this, but I won't let you rewrite history and steal what was meant for me. Marvane opened her mouth, then shut it. The flush in her cheeks was louder than any reply she could have given. Clydia turned to me, voice soft but cold. So what? You're going to sue your family now? No, I said. I'm going to enforce what my father wanted. And if anyone continues to misrepresent it, I'll let the courts handle it. I wasn't yelling. I didn't need to. Silence is only powerful when the other side expects you to stay quiet. Deshawn stood up without a word and walked away. The clatter of his chair broke the silence. No one followed him. For the first time in years, Marvane didn't have a comeback. Her face was still, her fingers tight around her napkin. Her eyes didn't meet mine. Clydia sat back in her chair, staring at the half-eaten piece of cornbread like it might tell her what to do next. I didn't wait for them to respond. I didn't owe them that. I looked at Orville, nodded once, and sat down. I'd given them the chance to do this the quiet way. They chose the opposite. The next morning, I found the envelope tucked beneath my motel door. No return address, no handwriting I recognized. Just my name typed in block letters on a plain manila flap. Inside was a small USB drive and a note printed on the back of a gas station receipt. It read, "You deserve to know what really happened." No signature, but I didn't need one. I didn't plug it in right away. I stared at it for a while, holding it between my fingers like it might melt. Then I crossed the room, pulled my laptop out of the drawer, and clicked it awake. The folder on the drive was titled, After the Funeral, Strategy Call. I knew that title. I knew the cadence of that phrasing. I'd heard Clydia say it before, usually when discussing money or legacy, or whenever she felt like the family's image needed managing. The recording started mid-conversation. At first, it was hard to tell who was speaking over the phone, but then I heard Marvane's voice, clear as glass. She sounded calm, confident. "We can't let her control anything," she said. "If Elira gets a copy of the will, it's over." Clydia replied, "She won't. She never asks. She just gives." Then silence. Then laughter, low and knowing. Marvane again. "That's what makes it easy. She wants to be needed. She won't push back." There it was. My whole relationship with them boiled down to a single truth. They mistook my love for submission. I listened all the way through, twice. The second time, I turned on captions, so I could see their words in black and white, just in case anyone ever doubted me again. By the time the audio ended, my hands weren't shaking. I wasn't angry. I was done. Not even an hour passed before my phone lit up with a call. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. They called again. The third time, I picked up. "Elira!" Clydia's voice was soft. Too soft. "Yes." "I just heard from Deshawn. I understand you're upset." "Is that what you understand?" A pause. Then she shifted tones. "If you go through with this, if you make this public, I don't know if my heart can handle it." There it was. The guilt grenade. "You've always been a passionate one," she added, "but don't let your emotions ruin what little peace we still have. You're better than that, sweetheart." I didn't say anything. "I mean, what's done is done, right?" she continued, almost pleading. "Let's not punish everyone for choices that made sense at the time." I ended the call. No dramatic line, no emotional rebuttal, just silence. Because sometimes the most deafening answer is no response at all. I closed the laptop, took a walk down to the parking lot, let the air settle. There were kids playing soccer across the street, the thump of the ball steady and careless. I stood there for 5 minutes, absorbing what normal looked like. Then I went back to my room, reopened my laptop, and began writing. Not a threat, not a smear, just facts. I started the document like this. My name is Elira Adams. I am the daughter of Henrik Adams. I was the named executor of his original will. I have since been excluded, manipulated, and lied to by those who were supposed to protect that legacy. This is what I know. I didn't list names, not yet. I didn't speculate, I documented. Each entry had a timestamp, a scanned copy, or a recording file ID. I made it clean, professional, not emotional, but unmistakably human. And at the end of the statement, before I signed my name, I added one final line. I was not removed from the family. I left it when it stopped being one. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay on top of the covers, fully dressed, staring at the motel ceiling again. Same old pattern of peeling paint and water stains. But this time, I wasn't waiting for them to make a move. They already had. And I was done being their cleanup crew. If truth was a bomb, I was done holding the pin for someone else's comfort. The morning after I sent the document, I took my coffee to go and walked the edge of the estate property. Not because I needed fresh air, but because I wanted to see it all one last time. With clear eyes, not the kind that hoped to belong. Tables were already being cleared, decorations tossed into trash bags. The reunion was wrapping up, but the performance wasn't quite over. People milled around the front porch, pretending to chat about weather, sports, the drive home, anything but the earthquake I'd set off. By mid-morning, word had spread. Eyes followed me, but lips stayed shut. I wasn't there to gloat. I wasn't there to be forgiven. I was there to finish it. They'd planned one last thank you brunch for the out-of-town relatives. Marvine, of course, had placed herself in charge. She stood near the mimosa bar, all smiles and clenched teeth, acting like nothing had happened. Clydia avoided eye contact altogether, busying herself with napkins that didn't need straightening. I was about to leave when Branwen stepped onto the patio with something in her hand, an iPad and a folded piece of paper. Her cheeks were flushed, but her spine was straight. She didn't glance at me as she walked toward the middle of the group, just cleared her throat and started reading. I have something I need to say, she began, voice shaking only on the first word. This is an email I received from Marvine 6 months ago, after I wished Elira a happy birthday. That got their attention. She opened the message and read it aloud. You can be friendly with her if you want, but just know you're picking a side. If you continue contact, don't expect to be included in anything going forward. Branwen paused. I didn't reply. I didn't want to choose. But watching what happened these last few days, I realized silence was choosing too. She turned to face me. I should have spoken sooner, but I see it now, what you've carried, and I'm sorry. No one clapped, no one moved. Even Marvin didn't interrupt. Her jaw flexed, but she stayed still, calculating, watching her narrative crumble from someone else's voice. I met Branwen's eyes, gave a small nod. Then I walked into the house. Not because I was upset, but because I had one last place to check before I left for good. The guest house in the back, where I used to stay during summer breaks, hadn't changed much. Same dusty curtains, same creaky floors. In the desk drawer by the window, buried beneath old postcards and dried-out pens, was an envelope with no name on it. Inside were 6 documents: hospital forms, invoices, donation acknowledgments, all in my handwriting. My name signed at the bottom. But each of them had been scanned, edited, and submitted under Marvine's. It wasn't just financial manipulation. It was identity theft, dressed in sisterhood. I sat down on the bed, placed the documents in a new folder, and slid it into my bag. When I stepped back outside, I didn't walk toward the others. I stood by the old oak tree and texted a short message to the group chat. Meet me at the driveway, 5 minutes. To their credit, they came. Marvine, Clydia, even Deshawn, though he stayed toward the back. I didn't ask for their attention. I didn't give them a speech. Instead, I handed each of them a plain white envelope. Inside, legal revocation forms, financial disassociations, cease and desist letters drafted by Orville. No emotion, just paperwork. I'm severing every tie, I said, calm and direct. No more accounts, no more emergency wires, no more fallback roles. If you need someone else to clean up your messes, I suggest you start now. Marvine stared at hers like it might bite. This is extreme. What you did was extreme, I replied. This is closure. Clydia looked at me like she wanted to speak, but no words came. And that was fine. I didn't need them anymore. I turned and walked to my car. Not a dramatic exit, not a door slam or tires screeching, just the quiet closing of a chapter I'd rewritten on my own terms. As I drove away, I glanced once in the rearview mirror. They were still standing there, papers in hand, mouths shut, storyless. I didn't burn bridges. I just walked away with the matches they handed me years ago. After I drove past the estate, I didn't take the highway. I took the long way back through town, winding past the school where I used to volunteer, the park where Dad and I once sat in silence, feeding geese like it was our own sacred ritual. I didn't plan it, but my hands turned the wheel on their own. Maybe my body knew where I needed to go before I did. The sun was soft overhead, dipping behind wisps of cloud, and the breeze smelled like cut grass and old memories. I parked by the curb, got out, and walked slowly toward the lake at the far end of the park. The same bench was still there, crooked on one side. The same water, still as glass, reflecting a version of the world that looked gentler than it was. I sat for a while, just listening. No music, no cars, just the water and birds and that strange comfort that comes from stillness that no one expects you to perform inside. There was one thing left to do. After checking out of the guest house that morning, I'd gone up to the attic, not out of nostalgia, but necessity. I knew there were still things left behind, things that used to matter. I'd almost missed it. Tucked beneath a pile of folded quilts inside a cedar chest was a small envelope, yellowed at the edges. My name was written across the front in Dad's blocky handwriting, the kind he only used when he wanted his words to last. No one had ever mentioned it. No one had delivered it. I opened it slowly, hands steady, breath low. Inside was a letter, dated 2 months before his last surgery. Elira, I know they'll never see you for what you are, but I did. I know what you gave, what you held back, what you swallowed so they wouldn't have to taste bitterness. I couldn't change them, but I could leave you something that said, I saw you. You were never invisible to me. That was it. No legal advice, no instructions, just words I had waited my whole life to hear. Only to realize now, I didn't need them to be okay. But they helped anyway. I folded the letter back into its envelope, slipped it into my coat pocket, and sat still. The lake rippled once. A goose honked in the distance. The breeze tugged gently at my sleeve. When I got back to the motel that afternoon, I saw the messages, all lined up in the group thread like beads on a string someone had dropped and never picked up. Neva's been crying. It feels weird without you here. You've made your point. Can we just move on? I didn't reply. Instead, I pulled up my emergency contact form, the one I'd filled out years ago when they insisted on being listed for insurance, for legal fallback, for the illusion of safety. I opened the form, deleted every name, and typed in my own. Emergency contact, Elira Adams. That felt more honest than anything I'd ever signed. Later that week, I printed out a copy of the family group chat, the thread where they'd shared birthdays, requests for help, fake encouragement, and empty praise. I folded the pages into a paper boat, neat and deliberate, then drove back to the lake. Same bench, same quiet. I walked to the water's edge, crouched low, and placed the boat on the surface. The wind caught it slowly, then fully. I watched it drift, no resistance, no collapse. "You don't owe them your silence anymore," I whispered. It wasn't a declaration, it was a release. I sat back on the bench until the boat vanished from view. Not sunk, just gone. That evening, back home, I didn't unpack immediately. I left the suitcase by the door, made a cup of tea, and watched the light shift across the walls. I was tired, but not drained. Alone, but not abandoned. Empty, but in a way that finally made room for something else. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but peace. And that was enough. I didn't win. I just stopped losing myself. And maybe that's the only kind of victory that lasts. Sometimes, walking away doesn't mean you've given up. It means you've finally stopped waiting for someone to treat you the way you've always deserved. For years, I believed keeping the peace meant staying silent. That being the strong one meant fixing everything, even when it broke me. But here's what I know now. Love without respect is a trap, not a bond. And being part of a family should never cost you your dignity. I didn't leave to hurt them. I left to save what was left of me. If you're watching this and you've ever been the one who kept things together while everyone else took you for granted, you're not alone. And you don't owe anyone your silence just so they can stay comfortable. We talk a lot in this country about loyalty, about forgiveness, about blood being thicker than water. But maybe the real test of love isn't how much you can endure. Maybe it's how bravely you can draw the line when enough is enough. So let me ask you, have you ever walked away from people you once called family? Do you believe forgiveness requires reconciliation? Or can it exist without going back? I'd love to hear your thoughts. If this story touched something in you, drop a 1 in the comments, or tell me where you're watching from. And if this video didn't sit right with you, that's okay too. Share your perspective. Let's have a real conversation. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, honest, human, sometimes messy, but always rooted in truth, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. You never know. The next one might just be yours. Thanks for watching. And remember, healing doesn't always look like hugging it out. Sometimes it looks like closing the door and finally locking it.